the pleasure of introducing you, Jess. Jess Kimball with Sunflower Postpartum Care is a full spectrum birth and postpartum doula and a newborn care specialist. She's been working with newborns for nearly 8 years. She helps parents find confidence in their choices and helps ease the adjustment of adding a new member to the family. She believes in a village style of support and a safe and easy transition from womb to world for all families and infants. Jess is a published author, midwife's assistant, and producer of the documentary, The Vermont Birth Experience. The Vermont Birth Experience. Let's give a warm welcome to Jess Kimball. Thank you for being here, Jess. Glad you're here.
Thank you so much for having me. I do want to mention I am based in Vermont, but I grew up in South Carolina. So this is something very close to my heart. I am one of 7 kids, and being a transplant to South Carolina and growing up there, I really saw how families could easily become isolated in the postpartum period. And just how important a strong community is. So I think it really does take a village, but we say it takes a village and families don't really know where to find that. And I think that postpartum isn't really the time when anyone wants to be building a village. There's so much going on. They need that support in place beforehand. The workload that's put on parents, I think, is impractical. The requirements and expectations for caring for a newborn have not changed, but what has changed is the level of support and the size of the support team. The United States doesn't have great postpartum support in place, which is why doulas, lactation consultants, and other providers play such an important role. I don't think that a good birth and postpartum experience should be considered a luxury, but unfortunately they are, which is why I think organizations that are providing in-home support are so important. And I know right now things are virtual, which can be tricky, which is one of the things I want to get into. I think that all families deserve the same opportunities, but how we reach the end goal is going to be different depending on what family you're working with. There's so many factors, and that's why I really believe in equity over equality. I think that the services that I offer, I know that some families can't afford them, and they're not accessible to everyone because unfortunately in the US we don't have employers covering a lot of these services. We don't have insurance covering doula care, and sometimes not even lactation support and things like that. So I try to offer support through like parent groups and things like that. I think that peer support is huge. One of the things I've noticed with families is that it's really important that they trust the person that's working with them. And when there's a problem, they need to feel comfortable coming to their provider, whoever the support person is, and telling them. But everyone responds to a different kind of care, which can be tricky to navigate because maybe there's one type of care that you prefer to provide. So one of the things that I found is that the 5 love languages are huge in providing care. Some families respond really well to words of affirmation and having someone just kind of cheering them on and reminding them that they can do this. Some people need more of like a physical support, which during COVID can be really hard. So I think navigating that by including their partner or someone who physically can be there by showing them ways that you would support them if you were there in person. One of the issues that I've seen a lot is people are trying to provide breastfeeding support via Zoom, and it can be really tricky. Just because you're not there in person, you can't necessarily see what's going on. Maybe you're just talking to them on the phone. I think that one of the things we forget as experts in this field is that the language, the vocabulary we have around birth and postpartum is different than what someone has when they do not have any experience nursing. So we might be able to talk about a tongue and lip tie and a weak latch and inverted nipples and all of these things. And I could mention those to a lactation consultant and they'll completely understand what I'm talking about. But saying them to a new mom, they might have no idea how to describe the problem to you. So I think when you're helping mothers navigate feeding virtually, providing them with a list of words that describe common issues that they might have, showing them, having visuals that you can show them so they can say like, okay, yes, visual one matches what I'm experiencing, because it's hard not being able to see it in person and they're not really equipped with the vocabulary to necessarily describe what they're experiencing. One of the biggest things I've seen with breastfeeding support is having virtual groups they're led by a provider like an IBCLC or a lactation counselor or someone, but there's a lot of moms attending and having discussions and offering each other support. I think sometimes it's just important to hear someone say, I experienced that too, and I get it. I think that a lot of times, parents trust their gut and they know the solution to a problem or they know what the issue is, but they second guess themselves and there's a lot of doubt. So I think it's important to provide as much support and education as we can and then remind them that they need to trust their gut because they really do know what's best for their baby. I see so many people talking about with social media being so big now, a lot of people are sharing their personal stories with breastfeeding and pumping, and it's great to see people talking about it, but we also see a lot of people showing like, I just pumped this many ounces at a feeding and or at a pumping session, and someone might see that and be like, well, I only pumped 1 ounce, and they feel like they don't have enough milk. They second guess if their baby's getting enough nutrients, and then they might switch to formula and just feel discouraged with nursing. So I think it's important to educate families on the infant stomach size, how to properly track output, because most babies are getting enough milk, even when mothers fear that they're not. I think that one of the biggest issues I've seen with the disparities in healthcare and equity over equality is there's less support for someone who is nursing when the provider is a different race from them. And I think that this is one of the reasons why diversity in healthcare is so important, but also talking about that issue and making sure that people are aware of that, and learning to not have that subconscious judgment, because so many of us are guilty of that. And it's really important to learn how to shut that off and provide the same level of support. And when I say the same level, that doesn't necessarily mean giving the same advice to each mom, because again, equity over equality, someone may need more support to get to that same goal, and that's okay. And that's what I think as providers we're supposed to work on is adapting the care we provide to help each family reach the goal they want to reach, because the nuclear family, and just one partner going back to work and that whole idea that these protocols and trainings are based on is not how families look these days. I think that language is such a powerful tool. So going back to providing families with the vocabulary and really allowing for open communication. I think that I do overnight care with families, and I know so many families where they're just up all night and it's 3 a.m. and they're freaking out about something. They're anxious. There's a lot of thoughts racing through their mind, and there's not really someone to ask. So I'm not saying set your hours to, the middle of the night, but having some way a family could submit a question. That way they can at least know, like, okay, I asked the question. I won't get an answer until business hours, but at least I asked it and I can worry a little bit less because I know that support is on its way. I think also, in the middle of the night, you can feel frantic and you can have a lot of questions. And then by morning, you're like, wait, what was I even worried about? Um, and then the nighttime comes again and you're worried about it again. So having a way for families to reach out and ask questions. But of course, I think as providers, I see a lot of times the boundaries between providers and clients can get blurred, especially if you're like a doula or an IBCLC where they're reaching out to you more directly. I think it's important to, prioritize your self-care and your boundaries. So don't look at the emails that they're sending in the middle of the night and don't feel pressured to answer them until business hours, but having some way that they can at least ask, even if that is just like a forum of moms that are all attending the same postpartum support group, the same breastfeeding support group. I say that because I think so many people ask questions on Facebook and then they get just so many responses. It can be very overwhelming. You ask a question and you get 300 comments and end up more confused than you were when you asked it, or you search it on Google and you just go down the rabbit hole of so much information, so many experiences being shared, and you can feel very overwhelmed. So I think having a smaller group of people that are meeting and know each other and can offer support to each other, and having a forum where they can ask each other. Another big struggle I see is balance. With providers finding balance, again, with self-care and setting those boundaries with your work. I'm personally very passionate about what I do. So, if I get an email at 3 a.m. and I'm at an overnight shift helping someone out, when I have a free moment, I want to answer that email, but I know that the person sending the email knows that it's not technically my email hours, my office hours to answer that. But setting those boundaries is very important, but also finding balance within the families. I think that so many families struggle when they have multiple children. They feel like they're not giving enough attention to each child. There are behavior issues that come up when a new baby is born that are just normal parts of the postpartum period, and that adjustment. So I think it's important to include the older siblings, and if you're working in someone's home, even just taking a moment to show one of the older siblings, like, here's how to change a diaper. And maybe they're not actually going to do it, but it makes them feel like they're involved a little bit, or showing them where things are in the nursery so that they can go retrieve things and just help out in ways like that. Showing them ways to engage with the infant. If you have a 5-year-old and a newborn, the newborn can't play the way a 5-year-old can. So showing the 5-year-old different ways they can engage with the newborn. I'm a big supporter of baby wearing. It's like one of my favorite things ever. And I love showing families different ways to baby wear because it's a great way to multitask. There's wraps that are easy to put on at home, and then you go to the grocery store with it already on, pop your baby in, and they're comfy and they just sleep the whole time. And it can make managing the grocery shopping and working with the other children easier for the parents. Having partners step up and showing them ways that they can have one-on-one time with their children, I think is huge. I think that the village really expands outside of the home. I know growing up, my village, or my mom's village, was the neighbors who, dropped off a meal or got the kids off the bus while my mom was busy doing something with the baby. But also just people in the community like doulas and volunteers and IBCLCs and just, all of those